Hi everybody, next up on our Great Books reading program, year 2, we're going to be talking about the first 2 books in Herodotus, the Histories. That's just books 1 and 2. I have a few themes to go over with you, a little bit of context, how this relates to our Great Books journey. And we'll see how this goes. The father of history, Herodotus, up next on Great Books, Big Ideas. Herodotus marks the transition from myth to critical inquiry. Even when you can't trust him, he's a lot of fun to read. He is known as the father of history. It's hard to come up with someone who was doing history before Herodotus, but he's also a pioneer of critical inquiry. Now, in books 1 and 2, Herodotus, he's a Greek, he's breaking away from the Homeric tradition in a way. So when we read Homer, like the Iliad, the Odyssey, you're really in the realm of myth, right? It's blended with legend and history, but it's hard to tell because the primary impulse of Homer is mythological and literary. Herodotus is doing something a little bit different. So instead of attributing human actions entirely to the whims of the gods, he's exploring human motives, political structures, cultural geography, as ways to understand why empires rise, why empires fall, and why empires inevitably clash. The histories are a turning point, like I said, a transition from mythos to logos. And they invite us to examine how the past gets preserved, how the other is perceived through a lens, our cultural relativistic lens. And he's challenging us to look at which forces really govern human history. Let me just give you a super brief summary of books 1 and 2. Book 1 is introducing the overall theme of the histories, which is the root causes of the conflict between the Greeks and the Persians. And he's shifting the focus from the mythological abductions, like wife stealing and things like the abduction of Helen of Troy, for instance, to more historical conquests, which culminate in the rise and fall of great empires. And a lot of the narrative in book 1 centers on Croesus, who's this super wealthy king of Lydia, which is this land in like modern day Western Turkey, whose tragic downfall serves as a moral lesson on the volatility of human fortune and the dangers of imperial pride. And following the Lydian collapse, the book then follows the ascent of Cyrus the Great, tracing how he united the Persian tribes, he overthrew the Medes, he aggressively expanded his kingdom across Asia Minor and into Babylon. And there's some interesting chapters on Babylonian customs. And then the book concludes with a warning about the limits of expansion. As Cyrus overreaches, he meets a violent death when invading the fierce nomadic Massagetae. This sort of establishes a recurring cycle of imperial overreach and cosmic retribution that you're going to find, in other stories. Book 2 hits the pause button on this military narrative that he's been spinning, and it really makes a detour. It goes into the ethnographic and geographical history of Egypt, which is prompted by the Persian king Cambyses, his plans to invade Egypt. He treats Egypt as a kind of inverted mirror to Greece. He details its unique geography, it's the mysterious flooding of the Nile River, the exotic flora and fauna. He's meticulously documenting Egyptian religious customs and practices, their embalming methods, mummification, their cultural ways. And then the second half of book 2 is reconstructing Egypt's vast history through a lineage of pharaohs. And it goes from the legendary builders of the pyramids to the more recent rulers. And then he's ultimately framing Egypt as this sort of timeless civilization that represents both the pinnacle of human achievement and the ultimate prize for this rising Persian Empire that's about to go down there. Let's talk about some big ideas and themes in Herodotus books 1 and 2. You could see cultural relativism as a major theme in the work. Herodotus's histories are underscored by this idea that the custom is the lord or the king of everything. He does a good job of thoroughly documenting different cultures that vary widely from Greece, and he's kind of demonstrating by doing that people are shaped by their traditions, and people can be ethnocentric. They view their own ways as superior to the ways of the other. But beyond cultural relativism, we could look at some other major themes like the instability of human fortune. The idea here is that human success and political power are fundamentally volatile and cyclical. You see this, for instance, in an anecdote in Book 1 where Solon has this conversation with Croesus, the king of Lydia, and Solon warns him that no living man can be counted truly happy until his death. This is a theme that you see cropping up in Greek tragedies, too, which we've just been looking at recently. The wealthy empires inevitably turn and collapse, while impoverished nations rise to power. So you have these kind of cycles of political power, and so human fortune is very unstable. There's also the theme of imperial overreach and divine retribution. The idea here is that boundless ambition and blindness to what's really happening or about to happen, that can lead rulers to overstep their boundaries. They overstep their geographic boundaries. They overstep moral boundaries, and this triggers punishment. It's open to debate whether this is divine punishment or just a human matter. Examples of this would be when Croesus oversteps his boundaries by attacking the Persians based on the sayings of an oracle. There's a lot of oracles showing up in Book 1. And Cyrus the Great, he meets a violent end when his insatiable thirst for expansion drives him to conquer the Massagetae people. Another theme or idea would be human agency versus fate and divine will. Boy, this is a big theme in the Oedipus the King play that we looked at, last stop on the reading program. But you've got this interplay of like oracles and omens, and it seems like the influence of the gods. People are still taking this seriously back then. It's all throughout these books. The question is, are they the actual drivers of these historical events? Or is it more about the human choices, like the political maneuvering, the personal motivations of rulers that's driving these events? I do think you get an idea for what the methodology of history can be here. It's interesting how he sort of he has different ways of accumulating evidence. part of it is what he's seen with his own eyes, like his own observations. He traveled around a lot. He saw some of these places for real. Partly he's piecing together using critical inquiry, using using logos, and some of it's through hearsay, through what others have told him or other things that he's read or overheard. And you cobble those things together and you begin to get like a historical picture of things. And as we see him trying to make sense of the history, it makes us wonder, what historical methods are most reliable? What would we rely on? What do we rely on to get our history and hopefully the most faithful kind of history? All this is in play in this really endlessly fascinating book by Herodotus. So next up on our year 2 reading program is a dialogue by Plato. Plato, where are you? Here he is. And this dialogue is Meno, or Meno, M-E-N-O. It's not terribly long. It's not as long as the Herodotus reading that we just did, but we'll sort of build on the Plato that we read in the year 1 list. Should be fun. I haven't read Meno in quite a long time, so it'll be fun to revisit that. And you can check out the playlist for this year 2. Well, the whole reading program. I've got all the year 1 readings up there too. We're just marching forward, and you can save that and subscribe and get caught up on the back issues, if you will. Please leave a comment or questions down below. It's always fun to read what you have to say. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you. Goodbye.